Good morning. My name is Dr. Kevin Karlson. I'm a litigation consultant who specializes in family law cases. For the last 30 years, I've been working with family law attorneys and their clients to prepare for hearings, trials, and depositions, as well as to evaluate mental health professionals' reports and to strategize with lawyers about how best to settle family law cases with the least damage to the children and the parties. Recently, I've become concerned about the impact of narcissistic personality disorder on the functioning of the family court system, particularly in Texas, where temporary hearings are now limited to 20 minutes per side because of the crowded dockets of the family courts. I want to talk today a little bit about the challenges of dealing with narcissistic personality disorders, or NPDs, in this abbreviated family court system hearing process, and how to strategize with both the client and the attorney in order to most effectively deal with the challenges of NPDs in the court system. As we all learned in law school, our system of justice is predicated on the principle that out of the conflict of two zealous advocates representing different interests of their clients before an objective trier of fact, the truth will rise like a phoenix out of the fires of the conflict. I contend that in too many family court cases where NPDs are a party, this fundamental assumption about how truth is uncovered and justice administered is fatally flawed. First, when an NPD divorces, the spouse is already at significant disadvantage. Spouses of NPDs are inevitably grossly wounded by their relationships, and so wounded that they have similar symptoms to combat veterans and PTSD sufferers. Worse than that, the isolation that they've experienced as a normal feature of their marriage has prevented them from realizing that the criticism, the threats, the insults, the humiliation, and the control that they suffered in private was not their fault, and that they are not worthless human beings. As a result, they are difficult clients to represent because they have such low expectations that anyone can help them, and they have to learn how to stand up for themselves again as a part of the litigation process. This background of humiliation and intimidation makes meeting with a divorce attorney for the first time a surreal experience. When they're asked about the details of their marriage, especially as it relates to business and financial matters, many of them are frequently completely in the dark and are unhelpful in preparing for a pretrial hearing, for a temporary hearing, or helping in any issues related to support. Clients are frequently very good moms and very engaged with their children, sometimes overly so, but they're completely unaware of the details of the family financial situation. Consequently, when she learns that her husband, the NPD, is not going to agree to a temporary orders and there's going to be a hearing, she is faced with a prospect of facing the NPD who has humiliated her over the course of their relationship in court. To say this is a daunting prospect is an understatement. The second thing that makes it challenging is that increasingly crowded family court dockets mean that the time allocated for temporary hearings is now limited in many family courts in Texas, at least, to 40 minutes 40 minutes with 20 minutes per side. This trend of short hearings favors NPDs in that they can make damaging, completely specious allegations about their wounded spouse in their hearing testimony without any fear of being successfully challenged by their spouse's attorney with contravening facts. Two more core characteristics of the NPD only make the challenge of finding facts in a short hearing more difficult. One outstanding characteristic of an NPD is that they respond to challenges of their outrageous fictions in two predictable ways. First, in response to a challenge, they double down on the allegations, and they make even more grandiose and fictitious claims about their spouse and about their own virtuous character and their parenting ability. And second, they increase the personal attacks on their spouse and add additional unproven and unprovable allegations to their prior testimony. Fortunately, one of the ironic characteristics of NPDs is that it turns out to be actually helpful, is that they have a tendency to blame their opponents, in this case a spouse or opposing attorneys, for their own faults. And so one of the ways that I always teach my clients about how to know what an NPD is up to is to listen to their allegations. NPDs, because of their need to protect their own virtuous character and their public perception of themselves, will blame their spouse for things that they're actually doing. In a recent case, I helped to represent the wife of an NPD, and the husband and father in this case alleged that his wife was abusing drugs. When the court ordered blood tests of both parties, the results came back and showed that the husband actually had been using pot and cocaine, and the wife was using therapeutic drugs that had been prescribed by her physician. This is only one example out of many where NPDs are caught by just listening to the allegations that they are spouting, because frequently those allegations turn out to be a window into what the NPD is really up to. So if you're representing the spouse of an NPD, what can you do? First, you need to listen carefully to your client and reassure them that you are going to represent them, that you will protect them, and that the system will ultimately catch their NPD spouse in his lies, given enough time. That means preparing the client for the temporary hearing in a way that allows them to be comfortable in their testimony and to anticipate the outrageous and frequently false, completely false allegations that will be spouted by the NPD spouse on the stand. For many spouses of NPDs, going to a temporary hearing for the first time without being adequately prepared results in the client being frozen by the overwhelming experience of being lied about in public to such an extent that they're unable to effectively testify on their own behalf. Consequently, pretrial preparation for temporary hearings is critical in these cases where you represent a spouse of an NPD. One of the ways to detect NPD spouses during the initial interview is that if your client is comes from a high net worth family, the spouse is a successful business person, a successful professional, or a high profile political figure, and the spouse looks anxious, depressed, and unusually self-doubting, then the client is likely the spouse of an NPD, and the attorney needs to take that into account. Second thing is that if you suspect that the spouse is an NPD, then you also should suspect that the NPD has been hiding assets, has been using drugs, and has been involved in extramarital relationships, because this is the standard practice for people with NPD. NPDs feel entitled to get whatever it is that they want without concern about the effect of their actions on other people, spouses, or children, and consequently NPDs have a habit of doing whatever it is they want to do that will get them what they want. Third, remember that whatever the NPD is telling his attorney about your client is mostly self-serving lies, and that the other attorney is most likely under the spell of the charming and articulate and persuasive NPD. Remember the old joke? Question: how can you tell when Mr. Smith is lying? Answer: his lips are moving. That joke was written about NPDs. It's important to take time to prepare your client to testify in the hearing. First, by getting a good marital history, and second, by coaching and practicing both direct and cross-examination. It's important to note that NPDs, in my experience, only back down in litigation when they're humiliated in public. And so it's important then that you have time to gather enough information to prepare for effective cross-examination, as well as to have time to cross-examine the person, the NPD, in my hearing situation where the fear of being publicly humiliated is apparent. Only after NPDs are publicly humiliated do they become more amenable to settlement and reasonable negotiations because of their fear of having their public image tarnished. So until you have a way of applying leverage to an NPD that will affect their public perception, that is the only time when you have enough leverage probably to successfully negotiate with an NPD. Otherwise, they expect that they will be able to lie their way to getting what they want, as they have successfully for most of their lives. Now that you've heard a little bit about NPDs and what the challenges are, I would encourage you that if you have a client who has been married to an NPD and you're in the process of litigating their divorce or custody case, that you would call me. I have helped literally hundreds of people who are coming out of marriages with NPDs. I have been successful in teaching them how to cope with the litigation process, to testify effectively, and to deal with the NPD spouse in the course of the litigation and afterwards. So hope you have a good day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.